Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is his co-host, Greg Hutchins. Good morning, Fred. How are you?
Hey, pretty good. Hi, Greg. Hey, I got I was going to phrase it as I have a personal problem, but that would be very long. So I'm on the board of a small community nonprofit that manages the water system for our community. And we pull water from a creek and purify it and distribute it to all the homes. And it's all volunteers. The board doesn't get jets or, lounge chairs or yachts or anything like that. And yet we've stood up and said, hey, we want to, help make the community work and get better and manage. Somebody's got to look at the funds that we're all collecting from our water bills to maintain our system. And I thought, I know a lot about maintaining systems and how things fail and all that stuff. So let me get involved. And one of the things that became very clear as I started diving into this team is that their idea of risk management is wait till it breaks and then hope we can find enough money to fix it. Just from a practical maintenance point of view, well, that's pretty silly. And two, what if something really bad happens that we just can't find enough money to solve it? That pretty much destroys the neighborhood. If we can't serve water, the county's going to red tag all the houses and say, you got to leave. And also years ago, I was reading through the history of the community I'm in. In the 1980s, it was capped off by the Loma Prieta earthquake, which destroyed big chunks of the water system. And it was such a big event that FEMA came in and then the state came in and pretty much replaced the piping, all the mains, basically. But prior to that, the state was pulling some wrecked vehicle out of a culvert upstream from us, and it let loose a whole pile of water, which flushed out the entire treatment plant. And there was a forest fire in the neighborhood, and there was helicopters flying over the top of the house, over the neighborhood, saying, you got 5 minutes to get out of here. A car crashed into one of the water tanks, on and on and on. The 80s was not a happy place. And it was one special assessment after another. Some of the disasters they were able to get federal or state money for, but only like one or two out of all of them that they got any substantial money. And we're a long time from the 80s, and our infrastructure is having been largely replaced in the 80s is now 45 years old. And a lot of those systems aren't expected to last. So not only is one of our tanks leaning precariously, I think it's at a higher inclination or leaning angle than the Tower of Pisa. And 10 or 20,000 gallon tank leaning like that on a slope is usually not a good sign. So when I brought up the idea that we need to understand what risks we're facing and what we are going to do to mitigate them or minimize them, or at least detect them when they're about to happen, and importantly is what do we do if it happens? What's the contingency plan if a car runs into one of our water tanks, for example? And I get blank stares. And these are all professionals, they all have professional jobs. They're all well-educated. And it's just, I don't know. I don't know how to introduce it to them so that it actually is not just a checklist item or a list of things that we never look at again. And that's what I'm afraid of. We can create one, but if nobody knows what it is or how to use it or expects to use it, then I'm like, I think that's not, I don't know how to get started, that first step to get the engagement.
So, golly, first of all, it's hearts and minds. So you live in an affluent area of forests or redwoods. In the past, you shared that, you've got an earthquake zone pretty close to you.
Yeah.
And then you got a bunch of trees around you. So basically, you live in an area of high risk.
Well, it's even called that. We're in like the top zone for insurance companies of fire wildfire risk,
That's
um,
exactly right.
and earthquake insurance. Luckily, in the state of California, it's a flat rate. It doesn't much matter where you live. The building codes are way different. You pretty much can't build anything here. Um, but it's yeah, we see the impact of the recognized risks to the area every month, every day.
And so, how do you basically introduce the topic? The topic, has to be personal. I mean, we've talked about this for over 10 years.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that the lens for all decision making now is risk based. Now, in your case, California, I think that's a basket case.
Well,
You
I
know,
don't think I'm going to move them up to Portland. Do what do
well,
they call it, an organized retreat, and move to California, move to Oregon.
Southern, Southern Oregon is in the same bucket you are.
Oh, I know. We're starting to get smoke from you guys now.
Oh, yeah, I know. I know. I mean, this is an important topic. So, quick story. My company ran the quality program for one of the biggest utilities, probably in the world, $1 billion, multi-million dollar thing. So, our job was to basically deal with quality, risk, and reliability of the system. And unfortunately, the system, which was an electrical high voltage grid, had a philosophy of running to failure. Now, this is so anathema to you guys in reliability,
Yeah,
but this is based,
it is one of many strategies.
it was the only strategy, is to basically run to failure. So basically, what that meant is the system was designed for maybe 40, 50 year. When I say system, it's a high voltage transmission system,
Mm-hmm.
was basically designed for 40 years. Problem was it was running, parts of it were over 80 years old,
Yep.
meaning, it was designed for 40, it was running to 80, and things were failing. And what happens is you basically, just like PGE, had a failure when one of their bolts or flanges or something up on the high line basically failed and caused Paradise to disappear.
Yep. And we're not talking euphemistically. It was the town of Paradise.
It was a town of Paradise, literally went,
Up in
it
smoke.
disappeared,
It
you
disappeared.
know?
Yeah, yeah. And they're still. And that was what 5, 6 years ago, and they're still trying
Absolutely.
to. It's still not recovered at all. They're really struggling to even try to rebuild.
And by the way, it's the same way for California and Oregon. Our system is, meaning electric power system, the grid is failing. And what you have had in a couple of years is basically brownouts, rolling blackouts.
Yeah,
That's why you put,
to prevent the sparks from igniting, is they don't enter. They will proactively de-energize the whole swaths of the state when it's high wind, high fire risk stuff.
thank you for clarifying, Fred, because we've been dealing with this for 20 years, actually running these systems. Um, Water now is what you're talking about. Or let's talk about stuff in general, almost all infrastructure,
Yep.
water, electricity, um,
Sewers in the
sewers,
cities,
everything.
yeah. Airports are getting old too.
Airports, yeah. All infrastructure is getting old. So in your particular case, how do you make people aware? I think you basically do the what if analysis. What if, a pipe bursts? What if the pump basically fails or flange fails or the
Mhm.
packing fails? What if your tower becomes the leading tower of wherever you live,
Yeah,
right?
tips actually finishes this tipping over.
Yeah,
We
finishes
also, oh,
tipping
did I
over.
mention we also live on an ancient slide?
Oh,
It-
terrific. So
it's
you've got three big high risk zones: earthquake, uh, forest fires, and mud.
yeah, and yeah, so I mean, so my idea was is to just what are the major threats that would be something that we either have to walk away from. Is that our plan, or what can we do? But landslide, wildfires, flooding, um, forest fires, car accidents, terrorism. Um, the water treatment guys are putting in more and more remote sensoring stuff. And so what about if somebody, hacks into that and just dumps all the water tanks and then starts a fire? Arsonists, the list goes on and on. Yet,
Hackers.
yeah. And and just maintenance, just plain old deferred maintenance. And like you were talking about, what happens to the water main breaks? What happens to this and that?
And do you have a contingency fund?
Oh, we've got it. Yeah, but it's not enough. It's kind of been a balance with the community of how much, they want to pay and set aside for such emergencies, that we have enough to pay our bills if everything's working for about 6 months. Yet we don't have any money to fix anything if it breaks. I shouldn't say it that cut and dry, but it's pretty darn close to that. And it's been pretty lean budgeting for a long, long, long time.
So let's run the contingency. Remember our buddy Carl, who's part of our little group,
Yeah.
who bought himself a condo in Florida?
As an earthquake, or not an earthquake, a hurricane headed his way.
Well, now there's a state law in Florida that says you got a condo, you have to have a contingency fund. So now they're basically, and this is a state law in Florida in the US, they're taxing people, not taxing, what do you call it? Asking the tenants, right?
Well, yeah,
that
we
have,
call it an assessment fee, or the
it's an
assessment
assessment
for
fee.
running the
And they're
system.
running 50 to 200,000 for a $800,000 unit. Should I say that again?
Yeah, no, I think we're actually higher than that. Our annual revenue is about 400,000, maybe 500,000,
But
somewhere
I'm
in that.
talking about per unit.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah,
if you
this
have
is the whole
800,000,
community.
yeah, if you have an $800,000 unit and you might have 20 units in the building, they're getting tagged for $50 to $200,000 per unit
Oh, wow.
assessment.
Yeah, that
So,
won't fly. We were talking last night. There was a group of us down at the community park, and
uh-huh.
and is one of the guys there he was like, yeah, when my neighbor, he was really complaining when I first moved in because the water bill went from $5 to $10. And that's for unlimited water, unmetered water. Your
Remember the
community.
old Meineke ads? You pay now or you can pay later.
Yeah. And so it's not like everybody has a Tesla up here or is affluent. It's changed over the years. There's still plenty of folks that aren't rich. And part of the decisions of, well, how do you deal with risk and risk management? And how do you prepare for it is a balance of, in a statement saying, hey, we want to continue to live here. And that might be a way to approach it, is because what I found personally is that I go through, here's the list of things that we need to actually think through. What are we going to do about, or what do we do after? And the eyes roll over, they glaze over. And we don't want, none of that will happen. I've been here for 40 years. And I said, well, we've had fires, we've had earthquakes, we've had car accidents, we've had water main breaks, and well, we got through it then. I said, people were taking showers in a National Guard tent because they're the only ones that had water up in the parking lot up the hill from here. So you want to go do that? you know, uh, but I don't believe the scare tactic directly works. And it's like trying to sell insurance to somebody if they're in their 20s. Like, what do I need life insurance for? I get that pushback a lot.
Yeah, hearts and minds. How do you basically change hearts and minds?
Hasn't
It's
that
a
been
tough
tried?
one.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. There's really, from our point of view, there are two big inducements. Well, there are a number of them, but one is fear, the other is greed, the other is compliance.
Yeah. See, what about, this is just talking off the top, Matt, as we're kind of hashing through this, is like, we do live in a really beautiful part of the world. We live in a redwood forest. There's parts of the state that are state parks or national parks that have redwoods in it. We happen to be able to live in the redwoods, and there's not that many redwoods left along the coast of California. So we get,
Mm-hmm.
and we are fortunate enough to live in and amongst these absolutely amazing, dangerous trees. And so part of it is, what does it take for us to be able to continue to live here? And I can point to we have a team in the community that's volunteered and stood up and said, hey, we need to clear brush and reduce the chance of fire spreading in our community so that the fire teams have a chance of getting it under control before it gets too bad. So there's a little bit of a fear in that message. And it was coupled with, there is something we can do today. And I don't know, there's probably a dozen or so people that spend a lot of time organizing work parties and teams and volunteer days and all kinds of stuff to say, and promoting that we can do something about this to mitigate this and minimize it. And they also have, if a fire comes out, they've gone through a practice evacuation series. They've gone through lots of how do you prepare to evacuate. Communities organize these emergency groups of neighbors that live near each other. Like, if I'm out of town, who's going to take care of my cat, kind of things. Just There's been an amazing amount of work on that. It doesn't cost very much, in the big scheme of things. And I heard it the other night, is that the infrastructure, like the water mains, are out of sight. The water turns on and it's clear and clean and tastes good and all the other stuff. So, it must be working. Oh, there's a whole bunch of squirrels running in cages to get it to work.
uh, there's also a public policy element to this thing that's changing. And this is, a good example of this are areas in Oregon, in Southeast, and Florida, where, you're in an earthquake zone, you're in a hurricane zone. And traditionally, FEMA would basically pay for rebuilding.
Mm-hmm.
An emergency would be declared. FEMA would pay for the rebuilding of the house or that was
The
destroyed or
roads or
whatever.
the bridges, yeah.
And the public policy sentiment was that risk would be defrayed, would be
Shared.
spread among many, many people, and that
Right.
was good public policy. There's a change going on now, which is part of the populist message that is, you're privileged, not you, Fred, but in general, right?
Yeah.
If you live on the coast, you live in a floodplain, you're affluent, you can afford, to pay for that insurance. And oh, by the way, that insurance cost will not be spread as it was before. You have to assume the responsibility and the liability.
Yeah.
So what happens is insurance, in this case, or FEMA, will simply not pay for reconstructing your house.
Yeah. They'll say, well, we'll give you a blanket and a tent. You're good for the day. You survive. But yeah, it's your house. You chose to live there.
And that's the privilege argument.
Yeah. And I can see that argument, but yet it also goes to fear.
That's right. It goes to fear. Because whole swaths of the United States now, including Oregon, by the way, and California, are uninsurable.
Yeah.
We
hear that all the time with bears. People, on one form or another are saying, hey, so-and-so just dropped our insurance. We've been with them for 25 years, blah, blah, blah. Anybody know where to go? But even, there's hurricanes and flooding and droughts and all the other stuff all across the country that I don't think there's a safe place anymore to live from natural disasters or vagaries of our infrastructure. So, well, anyway, wish me luck. I've got a meeting tonight that's kind of doing an inventory of the assets and then a prioritization of what do we need to focus on with the limited funds we have to make repairs or replacements and stuff. And then the next challenge is to build on that, going, the what if is probably the right phrase for it, is, well, what if we have a major earthquake? What if we have, and so on down the line. I think I'll start with the easy stuff. What if our main pump fails? What's our plan? And do we have the funds to deal with it in a short order? And then work up to the landslides and disaster city.
So can I say congratulations? Fred?
No, I think there's a different C word involved there. There's like
Basically,
condolences.
what you just articulated in the last 2 minutes is risk-based decision making
Oh yeah. Oh, it
at a
definitely
personal
is.
level,
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree.
based on fear.
No, I look at it as good for the community. If
One person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter.
Well, yeah, there's that. Yeah, thanks for that analogy. Well,
Okay.
wish me luck. It's
Yeah, good luck, Fred.
I'm not going to let it go. I mean, the state actually mandates that we have a risk management plan in place, and I'm not the kind that's just going to pull out a template and rubber stamp it and say, "All right, there you go." It actually has to be useful in my mind, so I'm going to try to make it that way. So we'll see what happens.
Good luck. By the way, this is going to happen for all infrastructure,
Oh yeah.
water, electricity, for everything. Everybody's going to need a risk management plan. So, hence, become a risk management expert.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll be on my resume after this. Like, give me a couple
Absolutely,
months.
Fred.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see what happens.
Yep. Good
I'll keep
luck.
you posted. Well, if you're listening to this and if you're seeing similar things in your community, whether it's a HOA for a small community area, or you're part of a small company or a big company, even, we need to think about all this stuff. So how is this affecting what you do and don't do, and whether where you live or where you work? Let us know. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. There's a couple of ways to get in touch with us. Greg and I and the other hosts are available through LinkedIn and our About pages. And plenty of ways for you to chime in one way or the other on it. And if you're moving to risk, I think Greg and I would both be very interested in that and what you see with that, how that transition is going. So please do get in touch. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. And if we get enough comments, who knows? One of these days, I'll work on a risk management course for Fred.
Oh, yeah. No, now we're talking.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Greg.
You bet, Fred. Have a great one.
I'll look for that course real soon. I'll talk to you.
Yeah, the checks in the mail.
All right. Cheers, Greg.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.